So last time I spoke about how the different trials in our life, they can actually bring us closer to the things that we treasure. And I concluded with the example of Yusuf alayhi salam to show a practical example of how the trials, they brought him closer and closer to the fulfillment of his dream. And today, insha'Allah ta'ala, I want to talk about the other side of the coin. Not what Yusuf alayhi salam was actually being brought closer to, but actually what was Yusuf alayhi salam at the very same time being distanced from. Right? We find that not only were the trials bringing him closer to those things that he treasured, but they were also bringing him further away from harm. They were serving as a protection for Yusuf alayhi salam. And if we go back and reflect over the different scenarios and the different trials that Yusuf alayhi salam faced, we would find that he always landed in the situation that was less harmful in the end. Right? And so our first stop is the scenario between Yusuf alayhi salam and his brothers. And the two options that they gave in the beginning was to either kill Yusuf on one side or to cast him out, expel him, throw him into a well, and a caravan is going to take him away. Right? And so the less harmful option, right, between death and expulsion is for him to actually be expelled. And so even in that trial, he was protected from death, right? But let's also imagine that what if death wasn't an option? Either he is expelled or he has to remain amidst his brothers. If he remains amidst his brothers, then perhaps he's going to be subjected to years of bullying, right? Sibling rivalry, negative influence and sentiments. Perhaps he's going to try to impress his brothers and try to fit in and be accepted and begin to change his character. So even in that situation, perhaps it was better for Yusuf alayhi salam and a protection for him to be expelled for that duration from the company of his brothers. And the second stop is the scenario between Yusuf alayhi salam and the caravan, right? Either he remains with the caravan or they're going to sell him to Aziz, right? And this caravan, from the little that we know about him, they did not really value Yusuf that much. They sold him for a few silver coins, not one gold coin. That's how much they valued him. They valued him so much that they put him along with the merchandise and the cargo. And so imagine the life of Yusuf alayhi salam. Had he remained with the caravan, this would have probably been a life of harsh treatment as a slave, hard labor, right? His quarters is the cargo and the merchandise. And he's kind of living between two places at all times. And on the other hand, you have being sold to Aziz, a person of prosperity. He has stability, right? And he actually commands his wife, Ekrimi Methwah, right? Make his abode noble and honorable, right? Something befitting of an actual human being, right? And so these are the two options that Yusuf alayhi salam is presented with this trial, and we see that he got the less harmful of the actual trial, and he testified, Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwai. He says, indeed, my master has actually made my abode beautiful and comfortable, right? And so he got the better of the two options, even with that trial. It's unfortunate, right? But he was saved from so much harm. And the third stop is also in the house of Aziz, the scenario between Yusuf and the wife of Aziz, right? And she presents two options as well. Right? قالت ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم. Right? She said, what is the recompense for the one who wanted for your family harm or evil, except that they're going to be imprisoned, right? Or they're going to face a severe punishment. They're going to be abused and tortured, right? So that's one scenario right there where we see that Yusuf alayhi salam, he escaped punishment. He escaped torment that has psychological and emotional trauma that could linger for years, perhaps even physical injury, right? But even less than that, if Yusuf alayhi salam had not been escorted into the prison, right, perhaps he would be subject to years of harassment, humiliation, right, speculation, suspicion, gossip, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he actually freed him from all of that by allowing them to put Yusuf in prison, right? And here we can now adjust our lens, right? Do we see it as the brothers of Yusuf ridding themselves of Yusuf, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ridding Yusuf of them, right? Was it the caravan that was selling Yusuf, or was it something else that were being sold? Perhaps their souls, right? And normally it is the people that are being protected from the prisoner, yes or no? Right? But in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, it is actually the prisoner that is being protected from the harm of the people. Right? It is not him who is actually unfit for this world and needs to be caged away from the people, but it is the world that is unfit for Yusuf alayhi salam. And so I don't see Yusuf alayhi salam as someone that is caged away from the world, but in reality, it is the world that is actually caged away from him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protecting him from the harm of the people. Right? So we can readjust our lens when we look at the trials that Yusuf alayhi salam faced, seeing the wisdom not just being brought closer to his dreams, but also being removed from so much harm. Right? And a few short takeaways, inshallah ta'ala. Number one, we all heard the expression, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Right? And one man's pain is another man's pleasure. Right? How true is this when we look at the life of Yusuf alayhi salam, his brothers trashing him, and then the caravan, they treasure him for a moment, and then they trash him, and then he goes to Aziz. This is like the life cycle of Yusuf alayhi salam. Right? But also what we can learn and what we can see is that the trials are oftentimes multidimensional. So many different lessons woven into a single trial. Right? Not only is he moving in the direction by every trial towards good, but he's also moving away from evil and harm. And there's a very interesting dynamic that I want to close with. We see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he used the trials, the great trials that Yusuf alayhi salam faced with his family and the people, to actually protect Yusuf alayhi salam. Right? And then he used Yusuf alayhi salam, right, to actually protect the people and to protect his family from another great trial, which was the pending drought and the famine. And so we see on a micro level, right, the minor trials being a protection from the major trials, right? And the trials that Yusuf alayhi salam, being a protection for him, and then ultimately a protection for all of the people and all of his family. And one lesson that we should pay attention to is be careful how we treat others. Be careful of those that we actually mistreat and we regard ourselves as needless of them. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is especially true in the family dynamic, he may facilitate or force a situation where those people that we see that we are needless of them, he may bring us back to them, right? Standing at their feet, standing in need of them, hoping that they do not treat us the way that we treated them before, right? And that is our talk for today. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.